But whatever Sneddon intended, it backfired.
We expected probably better evidence, you know, something that was a little more convincing, and it just wasn't there, you know, just wasn't there.
Sneddon began with a dramatic moment familiar to millions of television viewers, the now infamous documentary by Martin Bashir. The jury heard Jackson admit having boys sleep over at his ranch, and also heard how it happened.
And then he finally said, okay, if you love me, you sleep on a bed.
The boy accuser himself appears in the documentary, holding hands with the star and resting his head on Jackson's shoulder. When the day came for the accuser to testify about being molested, Jackson was more than an hour late, finally showing up dressed curiously in pajama bottoms. With Jackson in court, the boy told how, after he was diagnosed with cancer, he met the pop star.
Michael Jackson came into his life. Michael Jackson. And then takes him into his heart and wants to be his family, wants to be his dad. His parents were divorced, and he didn't have a dad. And Michael Jackson says, call me daddy.
But it was a relationship, the boy said, that took a sinister turn. He described how Jackson would get him drunk and molest him.
For the prosecution, the accuser, when he took the stand, was actually very good for them. He was composed, he told his story. The problem for them was when Tom Mesereau got a shot at him and really shook him up a lot.
He was a cancer survivor, and the defense couldn't really attack him. So basically, Tom just went about the business of slowly deconstructing his story.
As his tale unfolded, troubling inconsistencies popped up. The boy told a dean of his middle school that he wasn't molested. Was it a lie?
His story had changed over time. He had told cops at one point that he had been touched 5 times, that Michael Jackson molested him 5 times, then it was 7 times, then it was back down to 5.
I had a hard time believing him. I had a really hard time.
For the defense, the accuser was the biggest obstacle they had to overcome. Because if the accuser were to be believed, then the defense would lose. And so they were very prepared. Mesereau did a very excellent cross-examination.
He was just as deft with the only eyewitness, the accuser's brother. The brother said he saw Jackson masturbate while fondling the accuser. But again, key details just didn't mesh.
He couldn't remember whether or not, his brother had on clothes or didn't have on clothes, had on underwear, didn't have on underwear. Very key, important details. So that testimony, very fundamental to the claims of molestation, never lined up, never synced up. And I'm not sure whether the jury could ever reconcile that.
During the cross-examination, the boys began to look less sympathetic.
I'm sure Tom Sneddon, in a perfect world, would have had the Hardy Boys as victims here. And he didn't. He had a very tough sell. He had victims who didn't act like victims. He had unsympathetic victims.
If the credibility there had not really been as big of an issue, that this is just conjecture on my part, but it could very well have swung the decision in the other direction.
The prosecution's case was floundering. But then Tom Sneddon pulled off what many observers at the time thought was a decisive and potentially devastating coup. He convinced the judge to allow into evidence past allegations of child abuse that had been leveled against Michael Jackson. Allegations that would show the defendant had a history of molesting boys.
That was a major blow, and it created a case inside a case. So Jackson suddenly, his people are defending a whole nother case. They're defending allegations from the early 90s and mid-90s that they really, in almost any other state wouldn't have to confront.
I think they were devastated. I think Michael Jackson was devastated. I was in Santa Maria. I saw Michael Jackson that day. And when he walked out of court, he looked like he had been absolutely blown away.
The new allegations began with testimony from a now 24-year-old man. He said Jackson molested him several times from the age of 7, mostly while they watched cartoons. The man recalled one time when Jackson was tickling him. He reached onto his leg and then reached up to his, quote, privates. He said that afterward, Jackson gave him $100.
I mean, you could almost palpably feel the emotion in that courtroom when that young 24-year-old, the maid's son, we call him, testified.
He said that as a result of the molestation, he went through 5 years of therapy. And he said, with his wife in the gallery, that what he was saying on the stand, he had never told his wife, and he had never told his mom. It was very powerful.
As the jury soon learned, Jackson had done everything he could to keep the man's allegations quiet, including paying the man a settlement so he wouldn't sue.
I need an umbrella. Hey.
But the 24-year-old man was just the beginning. Other witnesses came forward.
You could almost feel the emotional currents running through the jury as they watched the mother of the 93 accuser testify.
The mother of a 13-year-old boy whose 1993 lawsuit made headlines by alleging Jackson was a pedophile, recalled Jackson begging her to let her son sleep with him. When she finally said yes, Jackson gave her an expensive bracelet from Cartier.
The testimony of the 1993 accuser's mother was devastating. She testified that she hasn't talked to her son in 11 years. She testified to having Michael Jackson sleeping in that boy's bed in her home, in his bedroom, for 30 straight nights. All the mothers on that jury looked at this woman with such great contempt, but yet also such, sadness, because she had ruined her life, and she looked like a woman whose life had been ruined. She just looked like a ghost on that witness stand.
A former Neverland security guard named Ralph Chacon corroborated the mother's account and gave more shocking, graphic details. He said he actually saw Jackson perform oral sex on the woman's son. Other Neverland employees added more examples of what they claimed was Jackson's method of seducing children. A maid said she saw Jackson kiss child actor Macaulay Culkin. A chef said he saw the singer's hand in Culkin's shorts.
All of these employees at Neverland say damaging things about Jackson, but the defense then is able to turn around and say, well, here's the motivation for that.
Many of the witnesses who came in to say that they had witnessed other alleged acts of molestation were then shown by the defense to have been disgruntled former employees, or who had filed lawsuits against Michael Jackson and lost, or who had tried to sell their stories to tabloids in the past. So everyone had an ulterior motive in this case.
Although the defense had punched some holes in the prosecution's case for Michael Jackson having a history of pedophilia, that wasn't the decisive factor for the jury.
We were instructed that if we found that Michael Jackson was actually guilty of molesting a child in the early 90s, that we couldn't automatically just then go directly to this case and say, well, therefore he's a child molester and he's guilty in this case. It didn't work that way.
Australia.
She was so bizarre. She was so unlike other witnesses that you see in a regular trial that it was absolutely astounding.
And I practiced 23 years and never seen anything like it. I mean, like everyone's heads were spinning.
It was 7 weeks into the Michael Jackson trial when prosecutor Snedden called his key witness, the accuser's mother. Defense attorney Tom Mesereau knew the prosecution was in for trouble.
The accuser's mother, Tom had said from the get-go, was our best witness. She's the type of person that will sort of change her story midstream. She will always make her story fit the facts instead of the facts fitting the story. And we knew that once she got cornered on the stand, that she would alter her story. She would start to make things up. And that's exactly what she did.
In a trial full of strange moments, this may have been the strangest of all.